Hey guys, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. And today I am going to be talking about Meeting the Undertaker, which is part 2 of the 30 Days of the Deadman lead up to Survivor Series. And this documentary was a little bit different to the ones that have been shown on the WWE Network in the past. And having just finished watching it, I can honestly say that this was very refreshing and very enjoyable to listen to a number of different guys, past and present, share their experiences and moments about the first time they ever got to meet Mark Calaway, aka The Undertaker. And we got to hear from Scott Hall, who kind of looked like a young Tom Selleck with the big massive Magnum P.I. moustache, and he explained that the first time I met him, he had no tattoos whatsoever. That's how long ago that was. And we got to see them in the ring interact with each other for the first time. And Hall explains that when I came in as Razor Ramon in '92, as far as I'm concerned, Undertaker was already a big star. So we got to see that. That was very, very refreshing. We also got to hear from Stone Cold Steve Austin, who has got a long history with Taker. And he tells the story about coming up in 1987 with big long blonde hair, and he met Mark for the first time, who was wrestling under the name at the time as Big Texas Red, and we got to see that little interaction. And Paul Bearer was there, pre-Paul Bearer, as Percy Pringle, so he was there, so it was kind of cool to hear that stuff. And we also got to hear from Mick Foley, who, as we all know, has got a long history with Undertaker. And he tells the story that him and Mark were in WCW together in 1990, and he got to stay at his parents' house. And he explains that when I saw Undertaker make his debut on television at Survivor Series in 1990, Mark Calaway, the person, didn't exist to me anymore. That guy was a completely separate person. So that was very funny to hear that. We also got to hear from Dave Bautista. Now, as we all know, Dave Bautista and The Undertaker had a legendary feud back in 2007, and it was really interesting to see him meeting The Undertaker for the first time in OVW in 2001, when Bautista was wrestling under the name The Leviathan, and you kind of got to see them working with each other a little bit. And Batista explains that the first time I saw him, he was just driving around on his big Titan motorcycle. So we got to hear that little story. That was a lot of fun. And we also got to hear from Randy Orton, who talks about the first time he met him, and we got to see them work together for the first time in 2002. And Randy Orton tells the story that, you know, the first time I ever saw Undertaker in person, he was scary and for real, so that was a lot of fun. And we also got to hear from Bray Wyatt, and he tells the story about when they were kids, that the first time they met him was in the hallway and his little brother kicked him in the shin and ran away. And then he says, fast forward 15 to 16 years later, The Undertaker goes up to the two of them and says, so, which one of you were the ones who kicked me in the shin? So that was a funny little story as well. Kind of a funny story to hear about the Big Show. Now, Big Show tells the story that Undertaker took me under his wing and he used to just tell me off all the time. Not in an arrogant kind of way, but just, you know, looking out for me and trying to get me to be better. And I remember their Unholy Alliance run in the second half of '99, and I remember Undertaker just used to tell off the Big Show that, you're stupid, you shouldn't be doing that, what's wrong with you? You want the knowledge? Then act like you want it, you know. So you could really see it was kind of like a little bit of a tough love relationship. But I would probably agree with Big Show about his comments, saying that I'm a better superstar now than I was before I met Mark Calaway, so I owe him everything for helping me be the man that I am today. And to a certain degree that is probably true. I do believe after Undertaker went to take some time off towards the end of '99, I definitely think Big Show got a lot better after working with Taker, because Big Show became a much more serious threat, and he just got better. He was just a better all-round giant, and a lot of that goes to Taker. We also got to hear from Drew McIntyre and how he always strives to be better because he thought Taker was laughing at him at one time, and we got to see them work together in 2010. I believe that was leading up to WrestleMania 26 against Shawn Michaels, so we got to see them interact a little bit. And we also got to hear from Edge, who tells the story about when he was part of the Brood, Undertaker took them in to join the Ministry of Darkness, and that was a really nice story to hear because we all know that Edge was a big part of the Ministry of Darkness, and we later got to hear Edge talk about how much it meant to him working in the main events of WrestleMania 24 against The Undertaker for the world title, so you can really see how much that meant to Edge. We got to hear from Roman Reigns. Now, as we all know, Roman Reigns' cousin Yokozuna was very good friends with Taker. He was part of the Bone Street crew, so we got to hear that little story, and we got to hear about how they met each other. They talked about all the different tattoos they had done, so that was kind of nice to hear that. We also got to hear from Xavier Woods, who said the first time I met him, I was a druid, coming up from the depths of hell during Undertaker's entrance at WrestleMania 29 against CM Punk, so that was a great story. We just got to hear from loads of different guys. Ric Flair, Michael Cole. I think for me, the highlight of this documentary was we got to hear from The Rock, aka Dwayne Johnson. The Rock very rarely gets involved in WWE documentaries these days because he's a big movie star. He's very, very busy. He's always got something on the go, and he's always doing something new and exciting. So to actually hear just a little bit from him was a very big surprise. And he talks about the first time he met him. They had a match in 1997 on a Raw Christmas show, which I remember that very well. Rock was the Intercontinental Champion. He was just transitioning from Rocky Maivia into the guy that we would come to know, and he talks about that it was one of the biggest matches of his life. And I think The Rock might have been 25 years old. I think he just turned 25. And Rock and Undertaker have had a very unique history because they've been adversaries, but they've been, I wouldn't say friends, but they've kind of been like looking out for each other. I would probably say they've had each other's back more as a team than adversaries. And they've had some couple of good matches. Pay-per-view meetings are very few as far as one-on-one matches are concerned. I remember the match they had at King of the Ring in 99 for this world title. They faced each other in the, I think was semi-finals in the Deadly Games tournament in 98, but that was more of a tournament. And they faced each other at No Way Out 2002, and I believe that was the last time one-on-one that they got to face each other. But they have faced each other dozens of times on Raw and SmackDown. But as far as pay-per-view matches, officially one-on-one, I believe it was only 2 times, which is unbelievable to think, especially the time that they were together during the Attitude Era and the big parts they played during the Boom period. Pay-per-view meetings were very few, so I'm very, very surprised that they didn't get to meet each other more often. But it was really cool to hear from The Rock, and he tells the story about when the company were priming me to have a WWE title run. There were a small collection of guys who tried to stop me from getting a push. Now, we all know who that is, we don't need to say names. And he tells the story that Undertaker looked out for him and says, just keep doing your thing, you've got a bright future here, you're going to be fine. Tell me, have you hit 30 yet? And he says, no sir, I haven't. He says, good, because when you hit 30, all your bones will start to ache. And that was a really nice story, and I think for me that was the highlight of the documentary, was actually getting to hear from The Rock himself, because I'm not saying that Undertaker didn't play a part in The Rock's career, because he did. Probably not a big part, but the involvement they had with each other was important to The Rock's development. So I would say he helped him out along the way. And they had some great promos together, some very entertaining segments together. I highly recommend you check out the one from 2000, heading into Unforgiven, where The Rock calls out all of the different personas of The Undertaker, and it was one of the few times that Undertaker actually owned The Rock on the mic, and it was one of the few times Rock actually got owned. It was very cool moments. I highly recommend you check that out. We got to hear from Triple H, who came in at 1995 as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and we got to see them work together for the first time in a match in Kuwait, and I've seen that match. It was very entertaining, although it didn't have a finish. Just the fact that you got to see Triple H and Undertaker work together, who'd go on to have very important matches years later, was very intriguing. And they talked about the first time they met each other. You got to hear from Hunter saying that, I met him, he offered me a shot of Jack Daniels. Obviously I don't drink, so it was just a little thing, but it was a nice icebreaker between us two, and it was a great respect there. And Ric Flair talked about meeting him in the early 90s. You know, we just got to hear from so many guys. Baron Corbin, of all people. You know, it's really cool to see how well he plays the heel, because everybody hates Baron Corbin. But when you see him after watching this documentary, he's a really nice guy, and he plays the heel role very, very well. And it's really cool watching all of these old films of Taker, pre-Taker. Some of the moves he did was just insane. Like, he was walking the ropes, he's dropping elbows, he was doing like an early version of his classic old school maneuver. It's just unbelievable to see how athletic Mark Calloway was. And we also got to hear from Bruce Pritchard, how he was Brother Love, his first manager when Undertaker came in at Survivor Series in 1990. We got to see Paul Heyman when he was Paul E. Dangerously in WCW, because he managed Mark Calloway for a while. So very good documentary, really enjoyed it a lot, very refreshing to hear all of these wonderful stories. And you know, you hear lots of bad things about certain wrestlers backstage, but Undertaker, you never hear anything bad about him. And he's not just a locker room leader and a true wrestling legend, he's an amazing, caring human being, and it shows throughout all of his documentaries. And in my opinion, I've said this a number of times, Undertaker to me is the Clint Eastwood of wrestling. He is a guy who has been around forever, he's worked very, very hard, and he's provided so many iconic moments for fans worldwide. He's loved by fans, and he's respected by his peers, and to me he is Clint Eastwood of wrestling. He's the man. So I'm going to wrap this up now. What were your thoughts on the Meeting the Undertaker documentary? What was your favourite story from any of the wrestlers? Did you have any favourites from them? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time. So until then, take care everybody, and stay safe.